Hey everybody, this is Chris with Overclockersclub. We've got something new from Terramaster. Okay, so I will go over the differences between these two. This is the new F2-423. This is the F2-422. So I know they're just one number off on the models, but I'll talk about what the differences are. So the box here is pretty basic. It took a pretty good whack here on the one corner. I've already looked at the inside and everything appears to be in good condition. But this is a 3.5-inch SATA hard disk. Let's see, a private space in the cloud, state-of-the-art TOS, which is Terramaster operating system. Again, it's the F2-423. The first number there, the F2, if you can see that, let me zoom in a little. The F2 means that it's a 2-disk or 2-bay unit. So if this was an F5-423, for example, or F4, it would have 4 bays or 4 disks or 5. And then the 423, I'm not sure exactly, that's just part of their model, but let's see what it looks like on the inside. Let me zoom back out. Oops. Or in, right? And I've been using Terramaster NAS units here for a while, and I've had zero problems with them. Now, if you're new to the world of NAS units, NAS boxes, NAS stands for Network Attached or Network Accessible Storage, and it's a beautiful thing because what you can do is put your data here on the disks, and you have access to it from anywhere on your network. So if you have multiple people on your home network, well, everybody can access the data whenever they want. Of course, you can set it up so certain people or some people have access at certain times and all that good stuff, but for the most part, everybody on the network can get in there and store their data or access it. So inside the box here we've got several items. Okay, we've got some little rubber feet, I believe, for the bottom, although this already has the feet on it. Oh yeah, there are two extra feet, so I guess if one of them comes off or is damaged. You've got some replacements. We've got a couple of little extra grommets here, some extra screws, or actually these are for mounting your hard drives. Some stickers so that you can label your hard drives if you need to know like the date you installed it and what's on it, that kind of stuff. So that's kind of useful. And you can put those labels right on the front here if you like, to make it easy, an easy reference. You've got, let's see, install hard drive. Okay, so this is showing you how to attach the hard drive to the trays, so we'll look at that here a little later. Quick installation guide. Okay, so you can scan in this code and it will bring up the information on how to install the operating system, and of course here's the warranty information. Everybody reads this front to back, right? I know I do. Maybe not. Here's an Ethernet cable. Let's see if this is a if this is a Cat 5. No, Cat 6. Cat 6 on the Ethernet, so that's good. And finally, there is a power supply. And let's see what the wattage is on this, or what it supplies. Let's see. So 120 volts in, 12 volts out, 3.33 amps, or 39.96 watts, so call it 40 watts is what this uses. Of course, that's usually, you know, when worst case, when there's a load on the system and the fans are running, or the fan, there's just one fan. But let's go over the actual unit here before we start plugging things in. So you can see here, this 423 looks just like the 422, so they use the same case. So nothing surprising there. If we look at the back, then we've got, this is your port for your power. So you plug in your power adapter there. And then we've got two ports. These are both 2.5 gig ports, which is nice. And I'll have to see if these are, I'm pretty sure you can connect these together through link aggregation, and you need a switch or a router that's capable of linking the ports together for link aggregation too, but I'll look at that. And then you've got an HDMI outlet here, and then we've got two USB ports there for USB hosting. And this is interesting too. I'll plug this into a monitor and you can see what's going on. Now, the F2-422, it actually has a port also, but when I first looked at it, that particular port was covered up. Let me turn around the back here. So there was a knockout there for it, so I went ahead and knocked it out and plugged in a monitor. So basically you see the operating system loading. It's not very exciting. It's good for debugging or troubleshooting, but that's about it. So I'm sure this is the same situation over here on this unit. But you can see we've got the same two USB host ports. The big difference here on the back, or really the only difference on the back, is the F2-422 has two normal LAN ports. These are both gigabit ports, and it has a dedicated 10 gigabit port back here. So you can use these two in link aggregation, so they sort of function as one connection, so you get like double the bandwidth there. Or you can just go ahead and plug in the 10 gigabit port there, and it will negotiate down to a 2.5 or a 5 gigabit connection if you connect it to it. So like right now, this is connected to a 10 gigabit port on this QNAP switch, and if I move it over here to one of the 2.5 gig ports, it will connect, and we should be connected here. Since these are maximum of 2.5 gigabit, these should be connected at a 2.5 gigabit speed. So that's pretty much the exterior features, but these pop right out. Now these trays, I believe, are a little different. They've made an improvement compared to the old trays, in that these you had to use actual screws, whereas these are like the old quick toolless or screwless connections here. So these just pop in and the little pins go into the holes on the side of your hard drive, like right here. So this isn't a drive I'll actually be using, but I'll just put it in here so you can see. So the business end here always faces in towards your unit when you install the drive. So you pop these little side pieces off. And this is a lot faster than having to go find a screwdriver. And you line up the holes. So you can see there's a hole there and it lines up. There are 4 places, and you sort of get those in there. And then when you pop these side pieces in, those pins go into the side of your hard drive and lock it into place so it won't move around, and you don't have to use any screws. So it's a quick, easy, convenient way of installing your hard drive, and that's all there is to it. When you want to take it out, you just pop these out and the drive comes right out. Now on the F2-422, I went ahead and just plugged in an HDMI cable on that HDMI port on the back, and you can see it's not terribly exciting. It's more of a reality check that your system is booting up properly, and it's good for debugging if you have a problem. So the next thing I'll do here, I'll go ahead and open the case up so we can see what's going on the inside. But actually, before I do that, let's talk about the Terramaster Lineup, if you are not familiar with it. So they basically have the F2-210. I've had a couple of these units, and they work just fine. No problems, no issues. But these are the bare bones, bottom dollar, entry level models. As I say, 195. It's $159 for the unit, and you have to supply your own discs. So all of these come without disks. So there's the F2-210, there's the F2-221. It just has some fancier hardware. It's $259, so it's an extra $100. Then we've got the F4-210 and the F4, these both say, wait, oh, okay. So 1 gigabyte and 2 gigabytes on, looks like the memory. Yeah, 2 gig of RAM, 1 gig of RAM, so that's the difference between these two. So if you want to use 4 disks, then for $199, you can go that route, and then $289, you get double the memory. The memory is useful if you're moving a lot of stuff back and forth all the time. And also, you've got some applications that are part of the TOS operating system, and more memory basically allows for smoother operation of background operations. If you don't use anything in the background, then the extra memory doesn't gain you a whole lot. So, and again, this is your entry-level home use sort of products. Then the next level here, we go to small business. And in the mix here, this is the F2-423, which is this model right here. There's an F2-422, which is this model. And like I said, I'll bring up the specs for both of these here a little later, and we'll sort of compare them. And again, the multiple disk units are good for like a RAID 5, and I'll talk about what RAID is if you're not familiar also a little later. And then you've got these units. These are more if you've got a bunch of data that you need to store, and this is something that a business would be more likely to use. And you've got medium business. Now these are going to be all your rack units, and they get rather salty. You've got several $1,000s for some of these, but this is this level here is nothing that the average home user, the average person, would ever have any real use for. Now we have the DAS, small office, home office, or home use. DAS is direct attached storage, and think of this as just an external hard drive. When you plug this into your computer is the only one that has access to it. It's not a network type of unit where everybody can see it. So it's nice if you've got a lot of information that you need to transfer back and forth just from your PC, and you need to back it up, reference it, store it, whatever. That's what these units here are for, and they've got different configurations of these units. Now I've reviewed the D5-300 and the D4-300. These are both great units for their application. And then let's see, finally you've got a DAS for video editing. Okay, these units here are basically, they use a Thunderbolt connection, I think. Yeah, Thunderbolt. The purpose here is for really fast connectivity between your PC and your storage. So if you need to move a lot of data in a hurry, this is the way to go. And again, these are not cheap by any means. Well, I guess down here, these smaller units aren't too bad. $329, $259. Again, you have to supply your own disks. But anyway, that's sort of the product line coverage for Terramaster. So from the Terramaster website, we can sort of look at what the information they have about it. So the F2-423 2-bay high-performance NAS for small or medium business. Let's see, it's for users who need high-performance storage solutions. So we've got a quad-core Celeron N5105 5095 quad-core processor, 2 gigahertz, maximum turbo of 2.9 gigahertz on the speed, integrated with a GPU graphics card and an AES NI hardware encryption. Okay, in addition, it's equipped with two 2.5 gig interfaces, which we saw in the back earlier, and a 4 gig DDR dual channel memory, expandable up to 32 gigabytes. So that's huge. Moreover, this storage solution is internally installed with 2 M.2 NVMe slots, which accelerate the SSD caching and double the storage efficiency of your RAID. So that is certainly a talking point here a little later. The F2-423 surpasses that of previous generations, offering a 50% improvement in that transforms the handling of high-load workflows. So that is also a nice improvement. They state different increases in moving data, but we'll have to see. Higher transmission speeds, so we got 2.5 gigabit interfaces. Let's see, each speed can reach 283 megabytes a second. That's using Seagate Iron Wolf 18 terabyte by 2 in RAID 0. Link aggregation. Okay, so that answers that question. So you can connect these two ports for link aggregation on the back. So you get a bandwidth up to 5 gigabits. Across platform file services. I'm not going to read all of this stuff. Virtualized applications, so you've got Docker and VirtualBox. Security, multiple commercial applications, and worry-free after-sale service, 2 years. One thing I'll talk about with the TOS 5, and that's the operating system that's used here. Late last year, early this year, there was a problem with people using ransomware, and they were able to gain access to some of these NAS units. Now, this was an across-the-board sort of thing. This wasn't a Terramaster problem by any means exclusively. This affected your other major manufacturers of these NAS units, including Synology and QNAP. So long story short, there were basically some exposures, some ports that could be open, and there were certain conditions that would allow people to get into your system with ransomware, lock it down, and you would have to pay a fee in order to decrypt all of your data. And I've never personally experienced that. Knock on stainless steel, I guess. But again, this affected a lot of manufacturers, so they were very quick to roll out patches and updates, Terramaster included. And as far as I know, these issues aren't like they were. I don't even know if they're still an issue. If I get online and look at some of the forums, it doesn't seem to be a problem. So the moral of the story is, don't keep all of your data all in one place. The rule of thumb is the 3-2-1 strategy, which is have at least 3 copies of your data, keep these copies on 2 different media, and store at least 1 copy off-site. So don't make a copy and then just keep it in the same room or even the same house, because if there's a fire or a flood or something happens, it could affect all of your data if it's stored in one place. And now it is finally time to open the case up here, and let's see what's going on. So I think this bit here should be the one. Let's see. So there are just some screws here in the back. Nope, it's the wrong bit. Ah, much better. All right. So you take the screws out. And of course you always want to be very, very careful. Now, as soon as the back is loose, you can see there is a cable there that goes to the fan. So that's your fan connector. And to make things a little easier here, I'm just going to see if that will unplug very carefully. Yeah, there's the connector. So set that off to the side, and this unit here I think pushes out from the front. Yep. And you can see this is just one big hollow aluminum shell. And this is where all the action is. So you can see these are the two, or the space there for the two hard drives, and there are the sockets that they plug into in the back plane there. So you can see on larger units, then they can utilize the same motherboard here, and they just plug in a wider back plane there for more drives. But looking at this in a little more detail here, so Okay, the memory is right here. Now it has a Terramaster label on it. I think they have a list of, I'll have to check, acceptable memory. I don't think they want you to just pop any old memory you have in there. There's your battery to maintain your system memory. So it's a CR2032. That's pretty standard on the battery. Let's see what else we have going on here. It looks like there's a little reset button right there. And then this is interesting too. So some of your operating system information, I believe, for booting up is stored right here on this little flash drive that is plugged into this little USB socket. And it looks like there's another header there for a fan. Now some of the larger units with larger cases have more than one fan, so that's probably what we have going on there. Over here there's a jumper, a couple of jumpers maybe. I don't think we'll ever have to fool with those. There's a very large heat sink. You can sort of see it, the black finned aluminum heat sink. That is going to pull the heat away from your processor, which is underneath that heat sink. So to get to the memory, if you were to upgrade it, actually there looks like there are two slots. And I think to get better access, I'll move or remove this chassis here. But actually, let's look at the bottom. So we actually have, okay, wait a minute. So this may just be, okay, so this really is one memory position here. The mounting clips there, this is like your laptop memory. It has the same type of mounting. It does only have one position there. And the second one right here, I didn't see it at first, is actually on the bottom. So you flip it over, and this is the location for your second memory chip if you're going to expand your memory. All right, and then we have two of the M.2 sockets here for caching. So that's kind of interesting the way they've done that now. So there's a little note underneath this first memory slot, and I'm a little curious to see what it says. So I think I will take this off, and it looks like it just plugs in again back here on the back plane, plugs in to the motherboard through it looks like, you know, a PCIe slot. So let me take this off so I can tell this is loosening up. I took out the 4 screws here that hold this in. And another thing I'll mention, it is in the middle of the summer. It is very, very humid, so I'm not too worried about static, but it's a good idea to wear an anti-static wrist strap. Summer is not such a big deal, but in the winter, when there's a lot of static, you always want to wear an anti-static wrist strap anytime you're handling your electronics. So you can see I can wiggle that. That comes off. All right. So now we can see the motherboard in a little more detail here. So that's what that looks like. But let's see here. So if we pop the module out here, again, this is a DDR4, 4 gigabyte SODIMM, and it's 2133 megahertz there, so you get an idea. And you can see right here, what does that say? Kingbo Mars? Interesting. All right. So we'll set this off to the side. And here's what it says, if I can get this little note out of here. All right, I peeled a little sticker off. I'll put it back and just be easier to read. So it's basically telling you how to put it in there. It says insert at 45 degrees C. Okay, I don't think the C is supposed to be on there, but basically insert it at 45-degree angle and press it down the same way you put your SODIMM chips in on a laptop. So that's really all that says. So we'll put that back. And as we look, it is, yeah, it's a single slot. So that's why you got a slot on the back and one in the front. And we'll go ahead and put this back in there. So we come in at the 45 degrees and push it and it locks in. All right, that was easy enough. And then we'll make sure we get that card back in the socket, and we should be able to actually the board has to go in at the front first, like that. There we go. So these little plastic tabs that stick out, you got to get the board on top of those first. Otherwise, it won't go back in. All right, we're finally getting close to getting the drives in there and getting it fired up. But I do want to point out, what I'll do is I'll compare the F2-422 to the F2-423. I'll bring up the spec pages and we can sort of look at the two side by side. But one thing I do want to show is they have a video guide section now. So when you click on that, it takes you to a whole page of basically short videos showing you how to do things. So how to install a hard drive, some troubleshooting. So each of these little videos can really help out if you're new to setting up a NAS. But back to the specs. And I have both of the spec sheets, F2-422, this one, F2-423, the new one. I have both the spec sheets up. The print's really small, I know that, and there's a lot of it here, and I'm not going to go through all of this. Actually, I'm just going to touch on a couple of the highlights. So the differences being the processors between the two. The F2-422 uses an Intel Celeron J3455. This uses an Intel Celeron N5105/5095. They're both 64-bit. They're both quad-core. The F2-422, it's 1.5 gigahertz and maximum burst up to 2.3, whereas the new one here is 2 gigahertz and a maximum burst up to 2.9. So it is a faster, I'm assuming that's a more modern processor, although this is not really old. The other things, we've got maximum memory supported. So this unit, the F2-422, can handle 8 gig, which is 2 4 gig chips, whereas this unit can handle, it comes with 4 gig, but you can go up to 32. So you can pop that 4 gig out, put a 16 in there, and add another 16. So the memory increase on the new unit is huge. The other thing is the hard drive capacity. So the F2-422 allows up to 36 terabytes, which are two 18 terabyte drives. It says capacity may vary by RAID type, of course. The new one, the F2-423, we can go up to 40 terabytes, which are two 20 terabyte drives. So it's not a huge increase, but it is an increase. Something else interesting here, this doesn't really say what the hardware encryption is, but hardware transcoding on the new unit, it does show that it's H.265 with a maximum resolution 4K 4096 by 2160, maximum frame rate of 60. So the H.265 is just a better way of storing the data. You can get more, I guess, more in a smaller space. So it's a more efficient way of transcoding. The other thing that I noticed is, and this is important to you, this one supports IPv4, this supports IPv4 and IPv6. Again, if that's important, then that might matter. But the rest of the specs here, and you'd really have to just sort of scroll through and compare them, but everything looks to be fairly similar. And the reason Terramaster specifies that you use only their memory, and I actually tried a couple different brands over here on the F2-422, and I think one of them worked and the other one it didn't want to boot up. But the reason they do that is because they've qualified the memory. They know what works, they know what will function properly. So Yeah, it may cost a little more, but it's going to give you no headaches when you plug it in and use it, because Terramaster has already validated it and verified that it will work. It's the same thing with motherboard manufacturers. They have their QVL or qualified vendor list for memory because they've tested it and they know for sure that it works. Will other memory work? Sure, maybe, probably, but if you stick to the QVL list or what the manufacturer recommends, that's the best way to go. And now I'm ready to get the hard drives in there. I'll be using two of these Western Digital 4 terabyte WD Red Plus NAS hard drives, and I'll show you how these go in. Again, I think I covered that earlier, but as you can see, there are no screws or fasteners. You just pop the hard drives in there. The holes in the hard drive line up there with these two holes that have little grommets, and then these little plastic pieces. I got the little pins that sort of stick up there. They go in the hole, and these just pop right in and lock your hard drive into this little tray, just like that. And then you just install the drive. You can feel it engage when it goes all the way in. And that's it. Now, basically, you have to get the TOS operating system on here first. So when I plug this in, really nothing's going to happen until I use the TNAS PC software, and it goes out on the network, finds the drive, and then you have the option to initialize the system and get the operating system installed. And there's a series of steps that you go through for that. And I have the TNAS PC software, the latest version of that, running. It found the other two drives I have on the system at the moment, and I can now turn this on, and I might have to refresh it to see if it finds it. And the LAN light down here is not on just yet, so it's still initializing. And let's do a quick refresh. So there's the first unit that I have, the existing unit. That's an F2-210. And it looks like this is the new one right here. So it found it, assigned an IP address, and then after you find the unit here, and it says uninitialized. So there's the little arrow there, and you click on that for login, and the initialization starts. And here's the initialization screen, so we are ready to start. How do you want to initialize? We'll just do an automatic. Data on the drives will be deleted, that's fine. And it takes a few minutes. And now you can see it's installing the TOS operating system. And this is the bulk of what needs to be done, but there are still a few things you need to do in the setup. And I'll show that here after everything is installed. And now it goes through a restart process, so it'll be back up here in a couple of minutes. So the TOS installation is complete. After that happens, it does ask you to create a username, password, and establish a security email. After you establish the security email, it sends a code. You check your email and you put the code in, and then it gets into actually formatting the RAID. Now, I'm not sure what the default RAID here is. You've got RAID 0 and RAID 1. I prefer RAID 1 in this case. And if you're not familiar with RAID 0 basically takes both of these drives and sees them as one. So if you got a 4 terabyte and a 4 terabyte, it will see 8 terabytes or just slightly under 8 terabytes of available space. The only problem with that is it if one of these drives experiences a failure, you lose all of the data on both drives. Now, RAID 1 treats these as mirrored copies. So everything that's on drive number 1 is mirrored over to drive number 2. You don't see 2 drives, you see 1 drive, but the RAID takes care of seeing the 2 drives as one. So I prefer the RAID 1, even though you reduce the capacity of what your 2 hard drives together would be. You really only have 1 hard drive available. And finally, the next step in the process is it goes through and it synchronizes the 2 drives, and that can take an hour, 2 hours. It depends on the size of the drive you're using. So after that synchronization process is done, it just does it one time, unless you have a problem with the drives and you may have to go through the resynchronization. But for the most part, it's a one and done. And I was curious to see what operating system version. I assumed it was TOS 5.0, but actually it was the 4.2.39. So I went ahead and went to the Terramaster website, downloaded the TOS 5.0, and you go in there for the manual update. You point to your download folder, to the update file, and then the loader bar kind of stops about halfway. It says it's unzipping the software package, but the update usually takes just, I don't know, 3-4 minutes. And while it's updating, you usually see a lot of activity there on the LEDs. Okay, so I've actually done a couple of more firmware updates. So we're on the latest, and I'm going to take the unit apart again and put a couple of these 1 terabyte SSDs from Solid IGM. These are the P41 Plus, up to 4100 megabytes a second. But what I'll do first is actually copy some files back and forth a few times to sort of see what kind of transfer speeds I get. Let me zoom in on that. And after I put the SSDs in there, I'll see if there's any difference in transfer speeds. So this is going from the F2-423 over to the F2-422. And it varies a little bit, but it looks to be fairly consistent. Got a little bump there at the end. All right, so we'll go ahead and get these solid state drives installed. So the goal here is to see if these really have any effect on transfer speed, on the performance, if they act as a buffer, or if they are simply additional storage for some of the applications that you can run on this system. And I'll show all that a little later. I'll also add another stick of memory there and see what effect that has. My guess is the memory will probably have a bigger effect, if anything, acting as a buffer for the transfer speeds. It's a little stiff going in. There we go. Oop. So I'll try these drives first, and then I'll come back and add the memory. Okay, it's fired back up and running. Now this is now available. It says SSD cache not created, so I guess we'll go ahead and create it. Before creating the cache, you need to stop all applications and stop the read and write operation of the volume. Okay. So we've got 2 terabytes. I put 2 1 terabyte drives in there. All data on SSD will be deleted. That's fine because there isn't any on there. Cache mode, write through, write around, write back. Okay, I'm not sure exactly what that means. Oh wait, here we go. It tells me, write through, safest. All writes are cached to SSD as well as being simultaneously written to disk, but some of the writing speed will be lost. Okay. Write around, very safe. Writes are not written to SSD, but directly to disk. Disk blocks will only be cached after they are read. Write back, fastest but less safe. Writes go to the SSD initially, being written to disk later. Well, I don't know if I can change that back and forth later or not, but we'll do write through first. Volume 1, SSD cache will consume your memory. In order to preserve the performance of the device, the maximum memory consumed by the cache is limited to less than 70% of the total memory. Okay, so that means maybe I ought to add some more memory here as part of this check. Let's see how it runs without the extra memory first. Okay, confirm. Configuring. Okay, operation successful. And after the cache is set up, looks like I can click here. Okay, and this gives me all the information about the cache. So it's set up in a RAID 0 mode. Okay, well, cache capacity 316 gig. All right, well, I guess I'll move some data back and forth like I did earlier and see what, if any, effect this has. All right, so now we're going to switch this over to RAID 1 from RAID 0. Okay, so it made the change, hit next. Okay, confirm. We're going to go and do the write back since that is the fastest method. Again, I'm looking for speed or to see if there's anything noticeable. So I hit the next. Okay, that looks good. And all right, confirm. Well, I thought I could just pop a stick of memory in here like I did on the F2-423 over there. And they're using newer memory. And I don't have any that will fit. So I will not be able to check to see what effect extra memory has. Okay, it is link aggregation time. So if you're not familiar with link aggregation, it basically takes two ports and combines them into a single port. So you've got 2.5 gigabit, 2.5 gigabit. The switch sees them as a single 5 gigabit connection, and that's how it behaves. But the first thing you have to do is go in, before you make any adjustments in your Terramaster unit, you go into your switch, and any managed switch will have the option to go in there and enable the link aggregation. So you define which ports you want to be connected, and let me go over to my QNAP switch. Over here in link aggregation, I'm defining ports 7 and 8. Right there, 7 and 8, and they are part of link aggregation group 1. And then when I come over here to port management to check it out, again, ports 7 and 8, you can look at the speeds. Ports 7 and 8 are now seen as 5 gigabits. That's my link aggregation group 1. And then after you're done with that, you come over to your TNAS unit, and you want to go over to the network section and interface, and you can see you can basically bond the two ports together so they behave as one, basically. So you got 2500 megabits a second, 2500 megabits a second on the between the two ports, and now they should be behaving like a single 5 gigabit connection. And on your desktop off to the side, it's called App Center. Click on that, and there are all kinds of apps that you can install. You can install as many as you want or none. But let's see, let me go, those are recommended. Let's look at all. So you've got all kinds of things here that you can use, and honestly, this is a lot of stuff here that I don't really have a use for, but it's nice to have it available. There are all kinds of apps. For example, there's a multimedia server, several backup apps that help keep your data backed up and help with error recovery. There's Python 3, something for surveillance if you're, I guess if you're moving a lot of video storage from cameras onto your drive. There's Terra Photos, Sync Server, Terra Sync Server, VPN server, USB copy, all kinds of stuff here. Docker. You can run a virtual machine on here. There's an iTunes server, Java virtual machine, MongoDB, Node.js, just all kinds of stuff on here. Here's a Plex media server. I know a lot of people do the media streaming, and honestly, that's something I don't stream media, so for me, again, something I wouldn't really use. There's VirtualBox, WordPress, all kinds of stuff on here you can play around with. Another thing to point out here on the control panel, if you scroll down here to General Settings, System, this is where you keep your firmware updated. In fact, I like to check the automatically check and download updates, apply. You really want to keep your firmware on the latest version. If you keep this checked, it will do it for you. It should do it for you. If not, you can go to the Terramaster website and get the firmware, get the latest firmware, and update that manually. It's pretty easy. But like I always said, keep your data in more than one place. Don't keep everything. As nice as this Terramaster server is, don't keep everything on one server. Split your data up in multiple locations. All right, well, overall, these two units are very similar. The F2-422 is, of course, a little older than the F2-423 that just came out. This one has some nicer hardware. It is a little faster. You've got more capabilities with this one, although, like I said, the performance is it's a little better with this one, but not by a huge amount. And the F2-423 does have the ability to use up to 2 SSDs, M.2 drives for SSD caching. Now, I tried that out, and I didn't notice that much of a difference with and without the SSDs installed for the SSD caching. Could be the drives, although those drives are pretty good drives as far as quality goes. They're not some off-brand that no one's ever heard of. But again, I did not see a huge jump in it. Perhaps the difference might be if you had multiple users accessing this unit at the same time. That may come into play as far as helping to move data. The data throughput might be improved. And the same thing with the link aggregation. I moved some data back and forth after I enabled this, and I didn't really, again, notice that much of a difference, really no difference at all. Again, where this might help out is if you're trying to access multiple users, moving data in and out. Things might be a little more efficient. But at the end of the day, the big determining factor is the hard drives. And when you're using the old standard 3.5-inch platter, spindle drive, whatever you want to call it, you are limited ultimately by the speeds that those drives can operate. So it would pay to invest in the recommended drives that Terramaster has on their QVL list for the maximum performance. So again, overall, I really like the F2-423. Pricing, let me move back up over here and zoom in. Right now on Amazon, if I can get my camera up there, we are looking at, and again, prices change, but this right now is $379 on Amazon. You do have to supply your own drives, and like I said, you'd be best to use the drives that are recommended by Terramaster. Other drives work, but a good quality NAS drive is certainly something you should not cut corners on. And of course, you can check out the other versions and varieties of drives, NAS units that Terramaster has. So overall, I've had pretty good luck with all the other Terramaster products that I've had. No real issues or concerns. Anytime I've needed any clarification or anything like that from tech support, they've always responded pretty quickly, so no issues there. But again, $379. You supply your own hard drives. I really like it. So I would give this the Overclockers Club Gold Award. So this is Chris with Overclockers Club. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.